Hi guys, I'm Jenn Johns. Welcome back to my Haunted Halloween channel. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make a haunted house gingerbread. I love haunted houses and I love being scared of them, but hate it at the same time. I don't really get it, but I'm sure some of you can empathize with me. So we're going to be putting a gingerbread haunted house on the top, and then here I have it stationed on a giant like rock pedestal thing that it's sitting on, and it's got creepy vines crawling up the side. It's got a little garden, a graveyard, and then hiding inside is nice and bright, cheery candy corn layers. So let's get started on this tutorial. So we're going to start out with the haunted house. We're going to be making it out of gingerbread. So here is my gingerbread cookie dough. I'll put a link to the recipe in the description box for you. You can use any candies that you want to decorate the house, but I'm going to go through what I'm using. I've got these little marshmallow pumpkins here. I've got some candy corn. Now I also have some hard candies. I'm using these for the glowing of the window. Yellow I find glows the best, but you can use any color of hard candy. Here I have some cut up pieces of black licorice. I have some black, these are licorice balls. You could use anything this size. You could use sixlets or any type of kind of like a gumball if you can find a black one. Here I have some crumbled up cookie crumbs. I have some black sanding sugar. And I have a chocolate bar. We're going to be using ones that you can cut up into small pieces. Now here I have these skull candies. They come in this larger size. I found them at my local grocery store in the bulk area, and I just cut them up into these little pieces. Now here I have some black jimmies. We're going to be using these black jimmies. They're just long sprinkles. And then here I have some black fondant, some candy bones, and a chocolate skull. So I've rolled out my gingerbread dough, and I've got some cardboard templates. I don't have a cutter for this, so I just made my own. So here, this one is going to be 2 walls and the roof. So I've got about 4.5 inches by 5.5 inches, and I'm just going to cut out 4 of these. You can use a sharp knife, or you can use like a pizza cutter or a fondant cutter like I'm using here. Now in 2 of those pieces, what you want to do is pop out a window. So just about 3/4 of the way up, and then just cut out a window like that, peel that up. And here I've got the 2 sides, or the front and the back here. So I'm going to cut out the front here, and I'm just using my cutter again. Just follow your thing, your little guideline here. And the size of this one is 8 inches in height. And then at its widest point here, it's about 5.5. And then its narrowest point at the bottom is about 3. So for this one, I'm taking a coffin cutter, and this is what I'm going to do to make the door. So I'm just putting it at the center of the door at the bottom and cut out the coffin. Now you want to keep this part for your door if you want to have a door. If you don't, you can just get rid of it. And then for a window, I'm just going to put the window about there. And then on the other side, I'm going to do the same thing, but without the door. So I do this one again. Now up here I have my chimney pieces. So this is half of the chimney, and it's a coffin shape as well. And I just used my coffin cutter in order to make this. And then you want to lean it up against the pitch of your roof in order to get the right size. I need to do it that way, and then I need to reverse it and do it again, going this direction. And then over here, the little pieces I have are 4 that go in between the layers. So this one is about 1/2 inch by 2 inches, and then these little ones are 1/2 inch by 1 inch. When you go to bake the cookies, you want to bake them in a preheated oven at 350 degrees, and you're going to bake them for about 8 to 10 minutes, or until the edges are just nice and brown. And the other thing to note is that if you want the cookies to spread less, just pop them into the fridge, let them sit for about 20 minutes when you've got them on your baking tray before you put them into the oven. So I've got the cookies baked and cooled, all the pieces to the gingerbread house. Now I have them flipped over upside down. So I've got the inside on facing up here. Now to get the portion for the window light, what I did was I took 2 of the lifesavers together, and then I melted them in an oven at 350 degrees for 6 minutes. You have to watch it really carefully because you can easily over melt them. If you're using like a larger like care candy, you only need to use 1, and you you can melt them for 1 minute longer. That's just what I've learned. Hopefully that helps you out. So what we're going to do to attach the light to the window is I'm just taking a little bit of white chocolate for my glue, and I'm just putting it here on the edges. You don't want to push too much there because you don't want it to squeeze into the window. And I'm going to put the flat part down so it's flush against that window there, and just let that harden, and then repeat on all of your other windows. So with our light coming through the window, we're going to work on the window frame. Something I've learned over the years of decorating gingerbread houses is it's slightly easier to go ahead and decorate as much as you can while the gingerbread is laying flat, that you don't have so much work to do while it's actually vertical. So I'm just putting a little bit of black chocolate there on either side of where I want the window frame to go, and I'm using the licorice for the window frame. So I'm just going to go around each of my windows and add a little bit of a frame. Now for the shutters, I've cut up my pieces of the chocolate, and I'm going to take my dark chocolate. I'm just going to fill in this area where the logo is, and I'm just putting enough in there. And then I'm going to turn that over into my sanding sugar. Just kind of dab it in there like that. And then if you want to clean up any of those little edges, you can just get those sprinkles or those sparkles all under control. And then I'm going to apply a little bit of chocolate to the edge here. I'm going to start it out there. And then I'm going to have all of my shutters go off at an angle so it's a little bit extra spooky. So I'm going to do that to all of my windows. Now we're going to work on the door. So I've got the door here laid out. I'm going to take my black chocolate and you just want to outline it, and then I'm going to fill it in with the chocolate. When you press it into the sanding sugar, it will all go together, which is kind of nice. You don't have to be neat at all for that part. So just take that and then turn it upside down, press it into the sanding sugar. And if you've missed any spots, you can just go back and repeat that step. And I'm just going to kind of clean up my edges, just like that. And then with the skull, I'm going to put the skull on the front here, basically like a knocker, I guess. So put a little dab of chocolate for the skull, and then a little dab of chocolate for the doorknob. I'm just going to use a little 6-slit for that. So I'm going to put the doorknob in there, and then the skull in place as well. And then you want to let that harden completely. So now we're going to work on the 2 roofs. Now for the shingles, I'm using candy corn. So I'm just putting a little dab of white chocolate, and then I'm alternating the candy corns like facing up and then facing down. And I'm going to do that covering the whole roof on one side. And then on the other side, I'm going to leave a gap for the chimney to fit. So I'll show you how to do that after I finish this first half of the roof. So I've got the 2 halves of my roof all covered with the candy corn shingles, and I left a gap here for my chimney. I'm not exactly sure how big it's going to be until I glue it together. So I left more rather than having to tear off candy corn, and I can cut candy corn pieces afterwards in order to fill any gaps that might be there. So next up, we're going to put the chimney together. Now I'm so excited to share with you guys my mom's favorite and secret gingerbread syrup recipe. It acts like cement, and it's super tricky, so make sure you have something to write down right now. What you need to put in a frying pan is sugar. That's all you need. And we're going to just melt it until it becomes this nice like dark brown that it is. And then I'm just using these pieces. Now the one thing is that it's extremely hot, so you don't want to touch it or you will get burned. Trust me, I have put together many gingerbread houses in my life. And I'm just being very careful not to touch the sugar there. And you can see that it's just solidifying pretty much immediately. So I'm just going to attach these other 2 pieces. Now when these are super, super small, I'm only going to do half of one here. And then I'm going to just squeeze that in there. And then it will hold like that. And then just kind of squeeze it together. And then I'm going to dip it in the other half. But I'm just going to give it a second here to solidify. So what I'm going to do to get that second side is I'm just going to dip that corner into the sugar. Now we're going to be covering the chimney completely in sanding sugar, so I'm not worried about what this looks like. We'll have to be more careful when we're actually using making the actual sides of the house. And I'm just going to repeat that step for the second piece here of the gingerbread house. So I'm going to put the sides of the house together now. So I've got my front and one of the sides. I'm taking the side and dipping it into the hot sugar. And I'm just going to do the same thing here and then just line it up at the bottom and then line it up around that edge and then just hold it till it sets. So now I'm going to attach the back. So I'm just dipping that into the sugar again. And if you're working while it's still a little bit warm, you'll be able to like kind of move the house a little bit still in order to match up the sides and the front a little bit better. So I'm just doing that here and put that into place and let that harden. Now for our final wall, I have to dip both sides of this one in here. And it is a little bit trickier when you've got both ends having sugar on them. So then you take that and then bring it down into place and line up that wall. Now we're going to put the roof on, and the easiest way I've found to do that is if you actually grab the whole house, you want to make sure that it's set at that point, dip it into the sugar, get the half that you want, make sure there's not too much excess there, I'm just getting a little bit off there, and then kind of wiping out on the pan, and then lean it up like that, and then take the roof half here, and then just line it up on top. And I'll repeat that on the other side. Now we're going to finish off the chimney. So I'm taking my black chocolate and I'm going to cover basically every single thing a part of the chimney that's exposed here in the chocolate and then the sprinkles. So just like I did the door, I'm just going to do that and make sure everything's covered. Now once I've got one side covered, then I will switch to the other side and just fill in everything. So now we're going to work on the kind of the finishing touches of the house for the moment now. And I'm going to be putting some chocolate up here, kind of in the middle, and using the larger chocolate, the licorice balls here, and placing those across the top. And then for the eaves troughs on the front here and then on the sides as well, I'm going to be using these little candy skulls. And you just have to hold them in place for a couple seconds before they set once you get it in place. And then I'm just going to go all the way around the front and then the sides of the gingerbread house. So the final thing for the house is to take our chimney, dip it into that sugar. If your sugar solidifies, like if you turn the temperature off, all you have to do is just put it back onto the heat and it will re-liquefy. So I'm just sliding it onto there and holding it on there very briefly. Now we're going to work on the cake. So now we're going to make the cake. What we've got here are 3 9x13s. I have a white, an orange, and a yellow for candy corn colors coming out. And we're going to be using a bunch of different buttercreams. For the outside of the cake, I have black, gray, and white. And the inside, we're going to be using yellow and orange. I'll put a link in the description box for the buttercream and the cakes. So I'm going to start with the yellow on the bottom, just like an actual candy corn. I'm going to take my yellow buttercream and I'm going to cover the cake. You don't need very much buttercream in a cake like this, unless you want it, of course. But because we're using the same colors as the actual cake, we don't need to kind of give any sort of like a surprise like you would if you were using a different colored buttercream with a regular colored cake. So we've got this yellow on, and I'm going to put orange on next. Now we're going to repeat the same thing with the orange layer. Squeeze your buttercream on and then flatten it out with your spatula. And I'm using an offset spatula just because it's a little bit easier than just a regular flat one. Gives you a little bit more of an angle to work your buttercream with. Now I'm going to take the white cake and I'm going to turn it upside down and then transfer it over to the top here. And I'm going to carve next. So now I'm going to carve the cake with the final layer on top. I've marked out enough room for the house to go. I've just used toothpicks for that. Now I want to carve the ends off and kind of these edges. What I'm going to do is like almost make it look like it's sitting on a rock or a cliff. So I'm just going to take off a really gradual amount. And I'm going to save a couple of these corner pieces because I want to build up some height in different areas. So just take a little bit off here and round your edges and work your way down to the bottom, to that bottom white layer. Once you've got the cake carved, you can take your gray buttercream and just cover the whole entire cake here with that color. And then we will be moving on to using the white and black after we've got this all covered. So I want to give a like marbled effect here using buttercream. You can also call it a watercolor effect. I've done it before on my Harley Quinn cake also. You can check that out. So what I'm going to do to this gray is I'm just going to add like blotches of white here. You can put them wherever you want. You want to determine like, do you want like a white focus? Do you want a darker focus? And I kind of want a darker look to the cake. So I am going to put quite a bit of black on. and like, or this, it's almost like a dark gray too. And a little bit of the dark color does go quite a ways. So I'm going to take a spatula now, and then I'm just going to blend it in. And the fun thing about this part is that you can do it like however you want to. You just want to get that marbling look to everything. And I'm going to do that all around the cake. Once we've got the cake covered in the buttercream, we're going to put a little garden here. And you could either make it a garden or a graveyard. I'm going to use these two mounds that are behind here as a graveyard, but I'm going to make the garden first. So I'm just taking some of the cookie crumbs, just spreading them out here, and just kind of want to make it flat. You can put an edge around it if you want to. I'm just going to leave the crumbs as they are. And then into here, I'm going to put a couple of pumpkins for a little pumpkin patch. And of course, it's not a completed Halloween cake if you don't have bones in the garden, because who knows what's growing in that garden. So now we're going to work on a couple other elements with chocolate. So now we're going to pipe some elements of the cake with our chocolate. Now I'm going to do a cross for the kind of like the little graveyard beside the garden there. So I'm going to do 2 of these, and you want to let them harden obviously completely before you go on to moving them at all. So a couple crosses here. Of course, you could put more like all around if you wanted to as well. I'm just going to put them by the garden in that spot. While the chocolate is still wet, you can of course move it around. Now I'm also going to pipe some spider webs. So I want these to hang off the house. So I'm just going to pipe just these, like, just kind of following a spider web pattern, I guess you would call it, and then just making these like little hoops in between here and continuing all the way down here. And then before the chocolate dries, I want to sprinkle and cover it with my sanding sugar. So I'm going to give it a little bit of kind of like a little glimmer there. So I'm going to do a couple of those for different places on the house. So I'm just rolling out my fondant here, my black fondant, and I'm going to make like some vines across the top here. So what I'm going to do is just use my veining tool and just add in some texture. You could use a knife or even like a fork to get some texture into these. You just want them to kind of look like it would be more realistic than just like a hunk of fondant. So I'm going to take this and put it up onto the cake in the corners, and I'm going to wind them in, like just kind of wind them up. You want to do it so it's like almost looks like it's climbing up the cake, kind of making it almost spooky looking. Then I'm going to take some of these black jimmies, and I'm going to use my tweezers and then poke them into the fondant here, and that's going to act as like little spikes on these vines. So I'm going to do a whole bunch more all around the corners of the cake. So to get the gravestone markers here in the graves, I'm just going to use a sharp knife, and this is just going to make a little bit of a hole there for the markers. And I just find like the less you have to press the chocolate, the better. I'm just going to take it off my paper and then just press it into that hole. So now we're going to grab the gingerbread house and work on it. So now we're going to put the gingerbread house on the cake, but before we put it up there, I'm going to put some tea lights in the center. These are just little flickering ones. You could do this after the fact too, but I wanted to make sure I showed you guys that. So then you're just going to carefully pick up your house and then put it around those tea lights. And I'm going to I'm going to finish off the vines, and I'm going to put the door up, and we'll be ready to show you as I cut into the cake as well. So there you go, everybody, how to make this haunted house gingerbread cake. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial today. I've got the cake lit up, the lights are on inside, I've got the spider webs that are hung now, and then I've sliced it open as well so you can see the cool candy corn layers on the inside. So if you enjoyed this tutorial, make sure you give it a thumbs up, and if you want to get notified every time we upload a video, make sure you hit the notification bell, which is right beside the subscribe button. Thanks so much for watching. Remember to subscribe, and I'll see you guys all again next time.